This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode 34. This week we honor the year 2006 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2006. We also look at the case for putting the band Marilyn Manson into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and our Spotlight Museum is the Blues Foundation Hall of Fame and Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. This podcast celebrates those who have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll also look at the case for certain artists to be inducted into the Hall who aren't there yet. Plus, every week we'll discuss a different musical Hall of Fame, Walk of Fame, or museum and celebrate someone who's been inducted into them. Let's start with our main focus of the podcast, which is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Hall Foundation was established on April 20th, 1983. Former Atlantic Records chairman Ahmet Ertegun was the head of the foundation at the time. 3 years later, a committee chose Cleveland, Ohio to be the site of the physical location for the museum over Detroit, Michigan, New York City, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Memphis, Tennessee, and Cincinnati, Ohio. I say physical location because members have actually been inducted into the hall since 1986, before the building was even opened. Cleveland was chosen because of what DJ Alan Freed did to promote rock and roll, including mainstreaming the phrase rock and roll, which was originally black slang for sex, and for also holding the first rock and roll concert. Ground was broken for the building on June 7, 1993. It opened on September 1, 1995 at 1100 Rock and Roll Boulevard on the shore of Lake Erie. The hall gets over 400,000 visitors a year on average. Normal hours of operation are between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. except for Thursdays when they're open until 9 p.m. They are normally open later in the summer months. General admission at the moment is $30. Children 6 through 12 are $20. College students, first responders, military members, and Northeast Ohio residents are $25, and kids 5 and under, Hall of Fame members, and Cleveland residents are free. ID is required to get the discounts. Rockhall.com is their website. That's rockhall.com. And as with all places these days due to COVID restrictions, check with the website for updated information and hours. The year was 2006. The Iraq War was in full swing. Former dictator of the country, Saddam Hussein, was hung by his own people. North Korea did its first nuclear test. Serbia became its own country after a split with Montenegro. Unbeknownst to most people, the events that would lead to the 2008 Great Recession began as the housing bubble burst. Foreclosures were up 42%, and AIG, the largest insurer in America, ended up in trouble with federal authorities over their business practices. They would get a government bailout a few years later. Famous people who passed away in 2006 included conservationist Steve Irwin, World War II hero Corporal Desmond Doss, civil rights activist Coretta Scott King, President Gerald Ford, economist Milton Friedman, Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet, Iraqi dictator, the aforementioned Saddam Hussein, businessman Lamar Hunt, boxer Floyd Patterson, baseball players Buck O'Neil, Kirby Puckett, photographer Gordon Parks, U.S. Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger, United Nations Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick, TV producer Aaron Spelling, cartoon producer Joe Barbera of Hanna-Barbera, journalists Jane Jacobs, Louis Ruckhauser, and Ed Bradley, Texas Governor Ann Richards, comedian Red Buttons, designer Oleg Cassini, sportscaster Kurt Gowdy, golfer Byron Nelson, actors Don Knotts, Shelley Winters, Chris Penn, Jane Wyatt, Jack Warden, Peter Boyle, Glenn Ford, Jack Palance, Al Lewis, Dennis Weaver, Darren McGavin, Mako Iwamatsu, June Allison, film director Robert Altman, legendary Boston Celtics coach Red Auerbach, and actress and activist Dana Reeves, writers Octavia Butler and Mickey Spillane and Peter Benchley, dancers Katherine Dunham and Fayard Nicholas, and Notorious Enron CEO Kenneth Lay. The Nobel Peace Prize was shared between Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank of Bangladesh for advancing economic and social opportunities for the poor through microcredit work. The World Wide Web content creators, as a group, were named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. George Clooney was named People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive for the second time, and Scarlett Johansson was named Esquire Magazine's Sexiest Woman Alive. The most popular books of 2006 included Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, books in the Twilight series, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, and the Percy Jackson and Olympian series. Also, Sarah Gruen's Water for Elephants, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, John Boyne's The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects, Nicholas Sparks's Dear John, Max Brooks's World War Z, Rhonda Byrne's The Secret, along with books by James Patterson and Stephen King. In technology, Facebook went from being a college-specific website to being able to be used by everybody. Twitter also started in 2006, making its promotional debut at the South by Southwest Festival. In October, Google bought a little company at the time called YouTube. The price tag was $1.65 billion. Computer widgets became a thing, and Pluto was told that it wasn't actually a planet, which upset it very much. In video games, Gears of War, Prey, and Saints Row were the big new franchise games. Sony put out the PlayStation 3 while Nintendo put out the Wii. Both did extremely well. In movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest was the biggest movie of the year. The year also saw Daniel Craig take over the James Bond role in Casino Royale. The first Da Vinci Code and Cars movies came out that year, along with a really bad Superman movie called Superman Returns. And when I say it was bad, it was bad. As far as the Academy Awards for movies from that year went, The Departed was actually the big winner, winning Best Picture, and Martin Scorsese for Best Director. Forrest Whitaker won Best Actor for The Last King of Scotland. Helen Mirren won Best Actress for The Queen. Alan Arkin beat out heavily favored Eddie Murphy for Best Supporting Actor for Little Miss Sunshine. Jennifer Hudson won Best Supporting Actress for Dreamgirls. The movie Babel won Best Film Score, and Best Song went to Melissa Etheridge's song I Need to Wake Up from Al Gore's climate change movie An Inconvenient Truth. In television, Monday Night Football left ABC TV and moved to cable TV, specifically ESPN. Also ending that year was Soul Train, Charmed, Will and Grace, That 70s Show, The West Wing, and Malcolm in the Middle. By the way, did you know that the poor dad on that show ended up dealing meth with some kid named Jesse in New Mexico? Sad. I hear he was pretty good at it, too. I think his name was Walter something or other. Also, Charlie Gibson left Good Morning America. Katie Couric left The Today Show. Mike Wallace left 60 Minutes. Debuting that year was Hannah Montana with some Miley Cyrus kid. Wonder whatever happened to her. Also debuting were America's Got Talent, NBC's Sunday Night Football, 30 Rock, and The Rachel Ray Show. The top-rated shows were all of the different nights of American Idol and also Dancing with the Stars, just to show you how popular those shows were back in the day. Other top shows were CSI, CSI Miami, Grey's Anatomy, House, and Desperate Housewives. And at the Emmy Awards, The Office won Best Comedy, and 24 won Best Drama. In sports, the Winter Olympics were held in Turin, Italy. Germany won the most medals with 29 total medals and 11 gold medals. The Pittsburgh Steelers won the Super Bowl, which was held for that season in 2007 in Miami, Florida. Prince played the halftime show that year, which was considered, and is still considered by many, to be the greatest halftime show of all time. Texas won the NCAA College Football Championship. The St. Louis Cardinals won baseball's World Series. Japan won the first World Baseball Championship. In basketball, Kobe Bryant scored 81 points in a game, becoming the second player to post a score over 80 points. Will Chamberlain is first with 100 points. The Miami Heat won the NBA championship. The Detroit Shock, now called the Detroit Wings, won the WNBA championship. Florida won the NCAA men's basketball championship, and Maryland won the NCAA women's basketball championship. Colorado won the National Lacrosse League championship, and Philadelphia won the Major League Lacrosse championship. Floyd Landis won the Tour de France, but then failed a drug test and had to vacate the title. In horse racing, Barbaro won the Kentucky Derby, but was injured in the Preakness Stakes and passed away from his injuries in 2007. Bernardini, by the way, won the Preakness, while Giselle won the Belmont Stakes. The Carolina Hurricanes won hockey's Stanley Cup. Mixed martial arts became more mainstream as the UFC 66 fight between Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz became the first fight to sell over 1 million pay-per-views. In soccer, Italy won the World Cup, Liverpool won the FA Cup, and FC Barcelona won the Champions League. In National League competitions, Chelsea won in England, Lyon won in France, Bayern Munich won in Germany, and FC Barcelona won in Spain. In Italy, there was a huge match-fixing scandal concerning the 2003 to 2005 seasons that came to light in 2006 and engulfed the clubs Juventus, Milan, Fiorentina, Lazio, and Regina, along with a bunch of referees. And in the end, Juventus were stripped of the league championship, and the championship instead went to Inter Milan. In golf, Phil Mickelson won the Masters Golf Tournament, Greg Ogilvy won the U.S. Open, while Tiger Woods won the British Open, the PGA Championship, and was the leading money winner with almost $10 million in tour earnings. Europe won the Ryder Cup. For the ladies, Kari Webb won the Kraft Nabisco Championship, Sairi Pak won the LPGA Championship, Annika Sorenstam won the U.S. Women's Open, and Sherry Steinhauer won the Women's British Open. Lorena Ochoa was the leading money winner with $2.5 million in earnings. In tennis, Roger Federer won Wimbledon and the Australian and U.S. Open, while Rafael Nadal won the French Open. On the women's side, Maria Sharapova won the U.S. Open, Justine Henin-Ardenne won the French Open, and Amelie Mauresmo won both Wimbledon and the Australian Open. In motorsports, Fernando Alonso won the Formula One Championship, Sam Hornish Jr. won the IndyCar Championship, Sebastian Bourdais won the Champ Car Championship, and Jimmy Johnson won the first of his 7 NASCAR championships. In music, the Police reunited for the first time since their breakup in the mid-1980s. Bands that formed in 2006 included Bingo Players, Bon Iver, Haim, Lady Antebellum, now called Lady A, LMFAO, and Cage the Elephant. Bands that called it quits that year included Black Sabbath, The Fugees, and Fear Factory. The High School Musical soundtrack was the biggest album of the year. Rounding out the top 10 albums were Justin Timberlake, Nelly Furtado, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Carrie Underwood, Pink, Beyonce, The Beatles with the Cirque du Soleil Love soundtrack, Daughtry, and Taylor Swift. Other albums that were critical darlings that year included those by Amy Winehouse, Muse, My Chemical Romance, and Arctic Monkeys. Daniel Powter's song Bad Day, which was American Idol's loser send-off song, was the biggest-selling single in America. Other big singles were Sean Paul's Temperature, Nelly Furtado and Timbaland's Promiscuous Girl, James Blunt's You're Beautiful, Shakira and Wyclef Jean's Hips Don't Lie. Natasha Bedingfield's Unwritten, Gnarls Barkley's Crazy, Chameleonaire and Crazy Bones Ridin', Justin Timberlake and Timbaland's Sexy Back, and Beyonce and Slim Thug's with Check on It. Famous artists who passed away in 2006 include James Brown, on Christmas Day no less, Billy Preston, Lou Rawls, Gene Pitney, Buck Owens, Bismillah Khan, Raj Kumar, rappers Jay Dilla and Proof, Gerald Levert, Wilson Pickett, Boz Burrell of King Crimson, Robert Lockwood Jr., June Pointer of the Pointer Sisters, reggae singer Desmond Decker, Clyde's Charles Smith of Kool and the Gang, Gene McFadden of McFadden and Whitehead, opera singer Robert McFerrin, singers Gloria Jones, Ruth Brown, Cindy Walker, Rocio Gerardo, and Rocio Durcal, Atlantic Records co-founder Ahmet Erdogan, Freddie Fender, Sandy West of the Runaways, and Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd. At the Grammy Awards for Albums of 2006, the Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks, won Album, Record, and Song of the Year, while Carrie Underwood won Best New Artist. At the Eurovision Singing Contest that was held in Athens, Greece, Finland won for the song Hard Rock Hallelujah. At the Tony Awards, Jersey Boys won Best Musical, and The Pajama Game won Best Revival of a Musical. And at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, who are the heads of A&M Records, were inducted into the Non-Performer Lifetime Achievement Award category, even though Herb Alpert is actually the trumpet player in Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. They are also the last people to be inducted into that category, as the category name changed. In the Performers category, the Hall inducted Black Sabbath, the Sex Pistols, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Blondie, and this next artist, and a jazz artist at that. Trumpet player Miles Davis grew up in Illinois and received his first trumpet at the age of 9. Davis went to college at the Juilliard School, which was then known as the Institute of Musical Arts in New York City, but ended up dropping out because, as he put it, they concentrated on European music. He decided to play the club scene with his mentor and friend Charlie Parker. It was with Charlie Parker who he helped develop the bebop style of jazz, recording what became the birth of the Cool album. During his time, he received criticism from black musicians for having white musicians in his band, but Davis didn't actually care about color. He only cared about ability. Also during that time, he went off to Paris, where he played in clubs and had a romance with actress and singer Juliette Gréco. When he got back from Paris, his style switched from bebop to hard bop. He also had a nasty drug problem, which led to what is considered his blue period. By 1955, he had gotten himself off of the drugs. Numerous shifts in his music happened, and during the next 15 years, he put out what became classic jazz albums. He had Roundabout Midnight, Milestones, Kind of Blue, and 7 Steps to Heaven. Along the way, he played with jazz greats such as John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and Wayne Shorter. In 1969, Davis wanted to bring his music to a new generation who had grown up on Motown and James Brown. By that time, Davis had started experimenting with electronic music and wanted to take it to the next level. He recorded his next album over 3 days in August. A lot of the album was improvised. The post-production was interesting as well. A lot of the songs were shorter versions pieced together to make a longer song. Song lengths ranged from anywhere from 4 minutes to 27 minutes. Also, there were multiple instruments playing different things at the same time. For instance, 2 bass players, one playing double bass and the other playing bass guitar. And Davis also incorporated funk music into the songs. On March 30th, 1970, that double album was released. It became an influential album for 70s funk artists such as Sly Stone and George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. It also influenced Radiohead on their album OK Computer and spurred interest in jazz again in the mainstream, helping to create a new style of jazz called jazz fusion. This album that influenced a generation of artists and genres such as funk, dance, and R&B in the 1970s was Miles Davis's aptly titled Bitches Brew. Miles would also influence all genres of music with albums like On the Corner, Miles Smiles, and Kinda Blue before passing away in 1991 at the age of 65, with 61 studio albums, 39 live albums, and 46 compilation albums to his credit. Miles has been given numerous awards, including 8 Grammy Awards out of 32 nominations. Presented for induction by jazz superstar Herbie Hancock, Miles Davis, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2006. Before we look at the case for inducting someone into the Hall in the upcoming class, let us look at how people get into the Hall to begin with. The criteria for being inducted into the Hall was originally that, quote, artists have to have released their first record 25 years earlier and have created music whose originality, impact, and influence has changed the course of rock and roll, end quote. That interpretation has been updated in recent decades to include music that rock and roll influenced, like reggae, country, and hip-hop, and also the youth culture that music has influenced, and also vice versa. And that, kids, is why hip-hop artists have been inducted into the Hall. The different categories that people can be inducted for are for musical excellence, which is for artists, musicians, songwriters, and producers who have had a dramatic impact on the music, early influencers, artists whose music influenced rock music and youth culture, like, say, the jazz or blues. The Ahmet Ertegun Award, which is named for the famed record executive Ahmet Ertegun and goes to a non-performer who has had an impact on music, like record executives and managers. There's also now a category that inducts songs that have influenced music, like the Troggs' song Wild Thing. Of course, the most popular category is the performers category, which has everyone from Elvis Presley to Tina Turner. The different nominating committees decide who will make the official ballots for that year. Then, ballots are sent to 1,000 musicologists, executives, performers, and other artists and experts. The fans also get a chance to vote, with that vote usually being held on the Hall's website. Then from that, the final inductees are chosen. Now, with all that being said, let's look at making the case for putting an artist into one of the upcoming classes for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, we're looking at shock rock band Marilyn Manson's chances of being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's right, kids. Time to feel old. Marilyn Manson's been around for at least 27 years now. Now, we're going to talk about Marilyn Manson, the band, as opposed to Marilyn Manson, the human being himself, for all the stats. So, with that being said, to the tail of the tape we go. Marilyn, the band, has 11 albums released so far. Of those, everyone except for their debut album, Portrait of an American Family, has hit the top 10, with 2 of those albums, Mechanical Animals and The Golden Age of Grotesque, hitting number 1. They've also had 10 singles hit the top 40, although the highest any of them ever got was their cover of Depeche Mode's classic Personal Jesus at number 12. As far as influence goes, here is where the band Marilyn Manson shines. They, along with 9 Inch Nails, helped to shape and make popular industrial and goth rock for the 90s kids. Their iconic videos have influenced other artists like Slipknot, Combichrist, and Korn, and have won them several awards. The band's been nominated for 4 Grammy Awards, although they have yet to hit one at least that got them a win. The band's been voted one of the 100 greatest artists of hard rock. Plus, both Marilyn the Band and Marilyn the Man have been highly controversial, especially pissing off conservative politicians, which is never a bad thing, truth be told. They've been blamed for virtually every violent act over the past quarter century, from the Columbine massacre to virtually every other school shooting. All of which makes them great rock and roll, because if your music isn't pissing someone off, then you're doing it wrong. With that resume, you would think that Marilyn Manson the Band would be a shoo-in for induction. There's just one not-so-slight problem. Marilyn Manson, the human being, is synonymous with the band, and he has been accused by multiple women of a multiple of charges, including sexual assault along with grooming. And even though the main case against him, filed by actress Evan Rachel Wood, looks like it's going to be dismissed by a judge, the damage has already been done, especially in the court of public opinion. That court does have some sway, as organizations like to stay away from people who they consider to be kind of toxic, truth be told, and to bring out the wrong kind of controversy. When you take that into consideration, along with another member of the band being dismissed for similar reasons concerning allegations of sexual abuse, their chances for induction are, at best, a very steep climb uphill. Many will argue that what an artist does personally shouldn't interfere with their accomplishments professionally. And that is a good argument to be made, actually, especially since a lot of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees have rather questionable past behavior, to be very nice about it. However, we don't actually live in an era where sexual assault allegations can be brushed aside anymore, even if it is rock and roll. Therefore, even though they would probably be inducted into the hall within the next decade or so, Marilyn Manson, the band, probably won't be. Back in 1980, the Blues Foundation decided to start inducting blues artists into its foundation's Hall of Fame wing. Much like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they inducted members long before they had a physical building. But that changed when the Blues Hall of Fame and Museum opened on May 8, 2015. The museum is located at 421 South Main Street in Memphis, Tennessee. It is located less than 2 blocks away from the National Civil Rights Museum, which is what used to be the Lorraine Motel. The Lorraine Motel is famous for being the place where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. The museum itself has 10 galleries, and as far as museums goes these days, it's pretty updated with modern technology. There's interactive touchscreen displays and databases, unlike a lot of museums where their button displays never work. We've all been to some of those museums. Smithsonian, looking at you. The museum is open Wednesday to Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, 1 to 5. Admission is $10, which is extremely cheap for a museum these days. And as with every museum these days, please check with their website for ticket purchasing and information due to COVID regulations, etc., etc. You know the routine by now. It's this year, 2022. Blues.org is its website. Now, there is no denying Ray Charles's musical genius. The man helped to invent soul music by combining rhythm and blues, jazz, and gospel. He also helped to integrate country music with pop and R&B to help it cross over. According to Rolling Stone magazine, Charles is the 2nd greatest singer of all time and the 10th greatest artist of all time. Ray was born on September 23, 1930 in Georgia. Ray's grandfather gave up custody of his mother, Aretha, to a family friend because Ray's grandmother had passed away and the grandfather couldn't afford to keep Ray's mother. That family friend named Bailey had an affair with Ray's mother, which created a huge scandal, and Ray was the byproduct of that affair. Ray started to learn the piano at the age of 3. At the age of 5, he developed a case of glaucoma and became completely blind. His mother fought for Ray to go to a school for blind children in St. Augustine, Florida, but when Ray was 14, his mother passed away. He left school after the funeral. Ray first started playing piano for other people in Jacksonville, Florida, then moved to Orlando and did the same thing, although at that point, the playing opportunities had dried up because it was post-World War II and all the soldiers had gone back home. Ray found it tough going for a while, sometimes going without food. He also had enough of playing for other people and wanted to have his own band. Ray followed a friend of his out to Seattle, Washington, but not before recording a few songs, which are the earliest known recordings of his. In Seattle, a couple of things actually happened that would have a consequence on popular music in general. The first was that he befriended a 15-year-old boy named Quincy Jones. The legendary Q would end up being lifelong friends with Ray and would work with him, with Quincy making his own impact on music, including producing the biggest-selling album of all time worldwide, Michael Jackson's Thriller. The second thing was that Ray finally got to start his own traveling band. In 1949, Ray had his first major hit called Confession Blues. A few more hits came along and Ray started to make a name for himself. And after a few years of being on smaller labels, he signed a record deal with Atlantic Records, which made him pretty successful. He still didn't quite have a lot of crossover success. Two things changed that. One was a song, and the other was an album. In 1959, Charles was 10 years into his career. He and his band were playing a show in Brownsville, Pennsylvania. He was playing what were known at the time as meal shows, where you'd play for a couple of hours, take a break, and then play for a couple more hours. On this particular night, the band had played through their second set way too quickly and had about 12 minutes left to kill. Charles had to think fast, so he told the band to start playing a fast blues beat and to follow what he did. He started playing a simple melody, made up words that didn't make any sense, and did a call and response with his backup singers. The audience went wild when the song was done. Charles decided to record the song after that. In February of 1959, Charles went into the studio to record the song at Atlantic Records Studio. The song, What I Say, was one of 2 that they recorded that day and was recorded in 4 takes with no overdubs. That was because the band had played it enough during their tour that they didn't actually need to work it out in the studio. There were a few problems with What I'd Say, though. The first was that the original version of the song was over 7 minutes long. They decided to cut the song into 2 parts. Part 2 is the more famous part that you know and love so well by now. The second problem was that there were some phrases in the call and response parts that were deemed questionable by 1959 standards, such as "shake that thing." Those parts were cut out, so the song wouldn't get banned. But even still, the song was banned for a time, not only for some lyrics, but also because it had a gospel feel. And gospel being done by secular artists did not wash back in 1959. How dare you? Of course, what the parents hated, the kids ate up and turned this song into a crossover smash. And soon, even British bands were playing it. The song is considered the song that birthed soul music. Plus, it's kind of a cool song to dance to. While Ray was signed with Atlantic Records, he achieved major success by combining soul, gospel, and blues. And in the middle of 1959, Ray switched record labels to ABC Paramount Records after getting an extremely above average for its time record deal. This contract gave him a better royalties rate and also his master tapes eventually, making him one of the first black musicians to have so much control over his music and career. Ray also continued having big hits like the songs Georgia on My Mind and Hit the Road, Jack. In 1962, he recorded what turned out to be considered one of the greatest albums in music history. Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music was Ray's experiment with country music. At the time he recorded it, racial segregation was at its peak and the civil rights movement was in full swing. Racial tensions were at a boiling point, so for a black artist to do what a lot of people considered, and still consider honestly, to be white music did not sit well with a lot of people, including some of the people on his own record label, and including some black folks and white folks. Nonetheless, Ray pursued his idea. Once he signed an extension of his contract, he and his band got down to business. He recorded and produced the album on February 5th and 7th at Capitol Studios in New York City and at United Western Recorders in Hollywood, California on February 15th. That was it. 3 days. None of this taking 5 years to record an album like some artists do. The album was a bunch of cover songs. However, Ray put his twist on them, including using a big band sound at times with lush string arrangements. Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music was released in April of 1962 and, thanks to a lot of marketing, became a huge seller right out of the gate. It spawned 4 hit singles, with each of them becoming big hits in the adult contemporary country and pop charts. In the process, Ray helped to bring country music into the mainstream. The album itself won Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards. He continued his career, but there were some bumps for him along the way. Ray was arrested a few times for drugs. The last time, they made him go into rehab. Listen, it was either that or do time in jail, so guess which one he chose. Thankfully, the experience actually got him off of drugs. Drugs didn't derail his career for a time, though. The changing music scene in the late 60s and 70s did that. Funny thing happened, though. As time went on, Ray became extremely respected and even revered. He began getting inducted into a lot of Hall of Fames, including being one of the first people to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with winning more than a few legacy awards. All of the newfound love allowed him to have a career resurgence, including which he even won another Grammy for Album of the Year, this time in 2004. There was also a movie based on his life called Ray, featuring Jamie Foxx, with an Academy Award-winning performance for Best Actor for playing Ray. Ray Charles passed away from liver failure on June 10th, 2004. The Genius, Ray Charles, inducted into the Blues Foundation Hall of Fame, class of 1982. And that is it for the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode 34. Thanks for listening. Audio engineering and editing, video editing, writing, narration, basically everything having to do with this podcast is done by yours truly. You can find us on our website at cjbtproductions.com. Our podcast is on all of your favorite podcast providers such as Apple Music, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Spotify, etc., all under Music History Today. If you would like to support this podcast, our Patreon can be found at patreon.com/Music History Today. We are also on Twitter at Music History Day. And you can now find us on YouTube. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. anytime you want to know exactly what videos are dropped and when. All of those links can be found in the show notes below. Thank you very, very much for listening.